All right. Hello, everybody. We are back. It is Monday. We still have the Monday night game for week 6, but we're going to go over all of the Sunday games. Another rough week on the game picks to an extent. I'm currently sitting at 8-6, possibly can go 9-6 with tonight's game if Dallas pulls that out. If not, 8-7. Either way, not very good. So we'll just run through them real quick. I had Baltimore picked, they won. I had Atlanta picked, they lost. Chicago picked, lose. Uh, Cincinnati pick, win. San Francisco, loss. Miami win. Jacksonville win. New Orleans loss. New England loss. The Rams win. Philly loss. Detroit win, and Buffalo win. And we had quite a bit go on yesterday. So in the early game, Lamar Jackson looked a little bit better, still threw an INT, but that offense seemed to have played better than they did last week against Pittsburgh. Derrick Henry, he put up his good numbers, 97 yards, touchdown, but he just doesn't have any help at the quarterback position. Um, Atlanta, this loss strictly was on Desmond Ritter, if I'm being honest here. I mean, he had a 3 INT day. We actually had a couple of those yesterday. Quite a few multiple INT games as well. But he just kept giving the ball back to the other team. And I thought it was funny because, it just kept showing their coach on the sideline in disbelief after pick. And it's just like, bro, you shouldn't be that surprised by this. Like, he's your quarterback. You should know his abilities. Um, but yeah, Desmond Ritter, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 INTs. Not a good performance. Um, Essentially, the Vikings and Bears, that was a matchup of a 1-4 team against a 1-5 team. Actually, they're both 1-4 going into it. And this was a terrible game. I saw highlights of it, saw clips, and there were so many turnovers. It was really bad. Uh, I mean, I say that. So the Vikings turned the ball over once on a lost fumble, and the Bears lost a fumble, and then threw two INTs. Justin Fields threw one, left the game with a hand injury. X-rays came back negative, and then the backup also threw one. But there was a lot of fumbles in that game. A lot of balls get knocked out of people's hands. Like, it was just sloppy all the way around. But Minnesota ultimately pulled it out. I thought Chicago could ride their momentum from the last 2 weeks. Did not pan out. Uh, Cincinnati, Joe Burrow played pretty well. I mean, he had two tutties, one INT, but he's getting back on track, and the Seattle offense is starting to get things together. Not the Cincinnati offense is starting to get things together. Geno Smith, 300 yards, 2 INTs, no tutties. So he had some struggles there. On to the San Francisco game. It was bad weather. McCaffrey got hurt later in the game. Debo got hurt early in the game. Both of them were out. And I mean, PJ Walker threw 2 picks. I know Purdy threw one. And the weather was bad. Like, there's a lot of things going on. Like, Cleveland's defense is really, really good. Like, yardage wise, they're the best in the league. I mean, they're saying they've held opponents to the fewest amount of yards through 5 games since 1971. So Cleveland's defense is legit, and despite all of that, I mean, everybody's wanting to put this game on Purdy because he didn't play particularly well. But game on the line, you know, right at the end of the game, moved his team down the field to get into field goal range, try to kick a game-winning field goal as time expired, and the kicker just missed it wide right. I mean, and not really wide right, but just barely missed it to the right. So Purdy did his job, got his team in field goal position under terrible circumstances a lot of quarterbacks couldn't get their team to field goal range in. So um, I'm not super concerned about this loss for San Francisco. Um, I mean, we knew no one was going to go undefeated. It just, the likelihood of it is so low. And I mean, at some point in time, everybody's going to lose. People are going to have bad games. They're going to lose. So I'm not super concerned about this loss for San Francisco. Um, they had some injuries, the weather, they were on the road, big game last week. And yeah, it's just, I I'm not concerned with them. I mean, they're a good team, and and despite how ugly the game was, I mean, I've always been a subscriber to good teams can play bad and find ways to win. Bad teams can play good and find ways to lose. And despite playing bad, Purdy found a way to get them in field goal range, short staffed on offense with injuries, offensive line getting manhandled by Cleveland's defense, and Purdy still got them in position to win and missed the field goal. And I think I'd read somewhere that field goals of that range are good 81, 82% of the time. So just a bad kick. Not a concern for San Francisco in the long run with this. Plus, it's an AFC loss, so that doesn't hurt them as it comes to tiebreakers in the NFC because out of conference games are basically irrelevant. So not bad for San Francisco. They'll get it back together. I trust their coaching. I trust their players. I think they'll bounce back just fine. Miami at one point down 14-0 against the Panthers. Come back won 42-21. Tua 262, 3 touchdowns. Uh, Tyreek 163 yards, touchdown. He's on pace for well over 2,000 yards, first time in history. With Justin Jefferson being hurt, Hill has jumped to the top of my list for Offensive Player of the Year. Um, he is on a brutal, a very brutal pace for yardage, and he's got a lot of touchdowns. I think he's leading the league with 6 receiving touchdowns. So he's definitely killing it. And I know a lot of people talked about Miami's defense playing better this game. They're playing the Panthers. Panthers offense has not been good. I know they announced that the head coach is not going to be calling plays anymore. He's passing that on to offensive coordinator. Don't know if that's his decision, owner's decision, but we all know their owner is not patient, and I'm sure he's probably had his say in that. So we'll see how that goes. But Miami played well. Mostert had a really good game, 115 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. Their offense continued to roll. So we'll see how they continue because they're about to get into a stretch of some tougher games. And it's kind of like that for several teams. Like quite a few teams have a stretch of difficult games coming up. So they're playing the Eagles next week. Then 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks from now, they play the Chiefs. They're going to play the Jets later in the season. They'll play them again. They'll play the Cowboys, the Ravens, Bills closing out the season. So they've got some difficult games down the stretch that they're going to be having to play. After that, we had the Jaguars played pretty good defense. Allowed 2 field goals up to the beginning of the fourth quarter for Indianapolis. Got 3 interceptions off Gardner Minshew. Travis Etienne finally found pay dirt a couple times. Had 2 rushing touchdowns early, and Jacksonville rolled through that one. Houston and New Orleans. New Orleans just didn't play that well. I mean, they put up some yards. Derek Carr, 350 yards, touchdown, interception. They did get Stroud to throw his first interception. That's something I'd called in my previous video, but ultimately, Texans were able to move the ball pretty well. Stroud delivered some great passes, some very on time throws, very on target passes, and they were able to come up with the big win. I know New Orleans was driving at the end of the game, had a chance to try to tie it, take it to overtime, and they just couldn't pull it out. But it's a pretty decent game. The Raiders pulled out the win on the Patriots. I thought Bill Belichick would bounce back on this one, but he did not. Uh, Mac Jones did throw a pick. It was an ugly pick. I don't know what he was thinking on that. He also got sacked for safety by Max Crosby later in the game, and that because it was 17-19 at that point, and 3 points would have given you the lead. But then, of course, that safety made it a 4-point game, and they needed a touchdown, and they were just never able to get it. The Rams finally look like they have a running game. Put up 158 yards for Williams and a touchdown. Cooper 148 yards and a touchdown. Um, so the Rams offense looks like they're clicking now that they got Cooper Kupp back. They could be an offense to contend with in the NFC. On to Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions in that game, so that's the third or fourth 3 INT game we've had. Hurts did not look good. The Jets got pressure with their front and really just with their front four, and they had Hurts uncomfortable. You could tell on a lot of his throws, his feet did not look good, and you can tell a lot by watching a quarterback's feet. If they're antsy, if they're facing the line of scrimmage, like instead of parallel to it, how you would want them, not parallel, perpendicular. But he just didn't look comfortable. They got to him early and forced bad throws, and then later in the game, like he was feeling that pressure even when it wasn't necessarily there. And this game was kind of the same as San Francisco. The key to beating Philadelphia and San Francisco is it's very similar. You have to beat both of those teams at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. And that's what the Jets did. Their defensive line of scrimmage manhandled Philly's offensive line of scrimmage, which allowed them to get pressure on Hurts, allowed them to slow the running game down, and it it paid dividends in the long run. I mean, they had their 2 best corners out, Sauce and the other guy, but they were still able to get 3 INTs. AJ Brown had a pretty good game, 7 catches, 131 yards, but ultimately their defensive front won the battle of the trench there. And then on offense, they were able to run the ball. Zach Wilson was able to be a game manager, not make mistakes, and that allowed them to win that game. So, and that's similar, like I said, similar to the San Francisco game. Cleveland defensively manhandled San Francisco's offensive line, and then their offensive line was able to slow down San Francisco's defense. So, both of those teams are built to win in the trenches, and when you beat them there, that's how you're going to beat those teams. Um, One big thing to note out of the Jets game is that Aaron Rodgers was seen walking around, no crutches. I mean, we're talking 34, 35 days post Achilles surgery, and I mean, there's people that are saying at this point they were still in a cast, and he's walking unassisted in regular tennis shoes, and he was actually throwing passes on the field. Wasn't taking like drop backs and planting that back foot or anything, but the wasn't planting really either foot, but he was moving. He was able to throw some passes, and I mean, people are astonished at where he is at in his recovery for this Achilles because it's 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 really unprecedented what he's doing. And um, I know he had like some kind of innovative surgery on it where it was different than what they've done in the past, and it's obviously had him on the road to a much better recovery. And I mean, when people were saying he could possibly make it back if the Jets make the playoffs, and a lot of people rolled their eyes at it, me included. And now it's like this might be a real possibility. Like the rate he's going, we may see him before the playoffs. We may see him in December. Um, I mean, if you're talking about 6 weeks from now, it's like who knows where his recovery is going to be at. So that's wild. Um, The final afternoon game was the Lions and the Buccaneers. Jared Goff had a really good game, 353 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And the Lions defense really played extremely well, held them to the Bucs to 6 points. So Detroit is looking very good, 5-1, tied for the best record in the league with San Francisco, Philly, Kansas City, quite a few teams, 5-1, Miami. So pretty impressive. The late game was not a pretty game for Buffalo with Daniel Jones being out. Saquon Barkley made his return. He had 93 yards on the ground. Kind of got me a little bit there because I did not play him in fantasy, but I didn't think he would play, and I had to set my lineup early. But controversial play at the end could have been called pass interference, which they had already had a pass interference call in the end zone, but it had given the Giants one more play to run from the one. Could have made a difference in the game because had they got it in the end zone, it would have been game over, 15-14. But ultimately, Buffalo held on, pulled it out, and found a way to win. And that's an ugly win. And like I said, good teams can play bad, find ways to win. Not super concerned about Buffalo after that game. You know, I wish they would have played better. Coming off of a loss in London last week, but a win's a win, and they got what they needed to out of it. So that's always good. We have the night game tonight. Dallas on the road against the Chargers. That should be a pretty good game. But one thing I have noticed, so every week of the NFL season, we have had a team be the talk of the league, and every week that team has lost the following week. So, week one, Detroit was the talk of the league, beating Kansas City opening night. Week two, they lost to Seattle. Week two, Dallas was the big talk, after beating the Giants and the Jets. Week three, what they do? They lost to the Arizona Cardinals. Week three, the big talk was the Dolphins putting up. Actually, week three, it was the Dolphins. They put up 70. They were the talk of the league. Turn around week four, they got beat by Buffalo. Week four, Buffalo was the talk of the league after beating Miami. And week five, they lost in London. Week five, the talk of the league was San Francisco after beating Dallas. And then they lose this week. So this is quite an interesting trend that's going on around the league right now. And now there's been a decent amount of talk about Baltimore this week. Not a whole lot about the Chiefs since they played Thursday night, but the Dolphins are getting some talk again. And I think if the Chargers beat Dallas tonight, or vice versa, Dallas wins and their defenses bounce back, like they could, both of those teams could be the talk for the week. So it'll be interesting to see who gets the most airtime this week, and to see if they win next week or lose next week, and see if this pattern continues. Had quite a few injuries yesterday. I mentioned Debo getting hurt, McCaffrey getting hurt. Both of them, X-rays were negative on both of them. Fields dislocated his thumb. X-rays were negative. No timetable on him. Uh, the Rams, I mentioned they got a running game. Running back Williams likely out versus Steelers. It says Bills Harris out of hospital, will be fine. I'm not sure what injury he had. Garoppolo left the game with a back injury. It says his prognosis is good. He ended up having to be taken to the hospital. I don't know what the extent of the injury. Lawrence day to day as Thursday night football game looms. I'm not sure exactly what injury he sustained, but quite a few injuries this week. I don't know. I don't necessarily think any of these are turf related. I know that's a big topic, and I think those are more so with lower extremity injuries, ankles, knees, things like that, and especially with the non-contact injuries. So these don't sound like any of those are really that issue, but yeah, quite a few injuries this week in the NFL. And I mean, that's never good for the NFL. It's never good for the fans either. it's not good for the product on the field with all these injuries. I'll say that. And I know there's big controversy yesterday, like so NFL TV contractually they have to cut to the game of the week at 4:25, 3:25, whatever time zone you're in. And it was right in the middle of the San Francisco Cleveland game, minute and a half left. They cut to it, and you see, player introductions, players running out of the tunnel, go to commercial, and it's like they could have waited till kickoff and cut to that game and try to catch the end of the San Francisco game. But I get it. TV contracts, networks pay for the that airtime. They pay for those games to be the nationally televised games. So I mean, obviously the NFL has to abide by that and put those on. Maybe in the future they could get some flexibility on that, but I know a lot of people were upset about that. Personally, it didn't matter to me. Um, but we'll see how things go tonight. I think the game will be pretty good. Former offensive coordinator of the Cowboys, Kellen Moore, facing his old team, the Cowboys. McCarthy trying to get this offense back on track after a terrible performance last week. Both teams have good defenses. Both teams can rush the quarterback, get pressure in the backfield. So it should be really good. I think these are two pretty evenly matched teams. I think this should be a good game. Hopefully, Brandon Staley does not mismanage the game like he has plenty in the past. Speaking of that, Pete Carroll severely mismanaged their game yesterday, essentially allowing Cincinnati to win. Some of these some of these coaching decisions are just atrocious. Like the average fan can see some of these decisions and tell how bad they are, but it is what it is. It's the NFL. They get paid millions of dollars to make those decisions. We do not. Um, I mean, here I am talking about them for free because I do not get paid to make those decisions, but something to talk about. And we will visit the Monday night game tomorrow or Wednesday, sometime the next day or two in the recap. We'll hit the Thursday night game. We have not the World Series. We have two big baseball series going on to find out who goes to the World Series, I believe. Rangers beat the Astros last night. I do not know the outcome of the other game, but also I will say I'd mentioned kind of bashed Notre Dame about how I think they're overrated, and they come out and played a really good game against USC. A lot of it looked more self-inflicted by Caleb Williams, just what didn't play well. But and I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, their defense played really well. They'd been giving up 450 yards, and they didn't give up that many." But when Caleb Williams throws three interceptions, two of them Notre Dame gets inside the 20, one at like the 1 or the 2, and they punch them all in for touchdowns. Their offense doesn't have to move the ball very far and get very many yards for that. So I'll give Notre Dame credit. They played really well, even though they're a two-loss team. They beat a highly ranked team. I think USC was like 11, 10 or 11. So that should bump Notre Dame back up in the rankings, but hopefully, at least for me, I would like to see them lose again, third loss, and get knocked out of the playoff conversation completely. So we'll see how that goes. I've not looked ahead to see what college football matchups we have this weekend, but hopefully we'll have some good ones. Not that I'll be watching. I'll be competing in a CrossFit competition, and so that's how my Saturday will be going. But like I said, we'll jump back on here, hit the recap for Monday Night Football, and we'll dive into a few topics of the weekend. See if I can get on my soapbox about some topics. Pretty good at doing that, and we'll see how it goes. So I hope your teams won yesterday, and I can say that because my team did not play, so I don't necessarily hope any team lost. Um, I will say it is satisfying to see the Bears lose. I hate the Bears; they're my least favorite team. Uh, and they were playing Minnesota, so if Minnesota had to win a game, that's the game I'd want them to win. I still think they're going to struggle over the next 4 to 6 weeks with Jefferson being out. I know they did say in a few weeks they're going to do some imaging on his hamstring to determine the exact length, but Currently, they're projecting 4 to 6 weeks. And Green Bay does play them once in that stretch, so hopefully that will help Green Bay beat them. But in the meantime, I think the Lions have just steadily taken control of the NFC North. Them being 5-1, Green Bay being 2-3, Vikings being 2-4, and the Bears being 1-5. Detroit's got that NFC North locked up. But we'll be back on here tomorrow. Hope y'all enjoyed the videos. And again, hope your team won this week, or if your team plays tonight, hope it wins. And we'll discuss tomorrow.